Welcome back to the edge of survival. Tonight's story begins with alarms screaming inside a crippled shuttle as it descends toward HOX, a Class 1 death world where gravity crushes, air corrodes, and hesitation kills. Among terrified alien students stands one human, Maya Carter, labeled Class 12, Hazardous, absurdly adaptable. What follows is not just a field trip gone wrong, but a test of breath, choice, and the cost of refusing to leave anyone behind. Stay with us and step into the storm. Alarms braided into a metallic choir as the shuttle knifed into HOX's ink-black air. Harnesses bit, visors flashed warnings. The cabin rocked like a tin can in surf. Outside, pressure thickened, turning descent into a slow-motion collision. While corrosive grit shrieked along the hull and the thermal loop dumped heat into dead circuits. Students in layered suits clutched restraints, breaths stuttering, fog freezing on glass. The pilot and I spoke without fear, reciting probabilities that climbed like a pulse. Professor Zorveth's voice tried to sound instructional, but it frayed at the edges. Maya Carter checked her seals, jaw set, eyes scanning lockers and tethers, as if the crash were already history. The planet pulled harder, metal screamed, the world struck. And the lesson began. In the red emergency light, Relix watched her hands and realized danger sometimes wore a human face. The cabin settled at a crooked angle, gravity pressing like a verdict. Oxygen scrubbers coughed, filter saturation climbed. A red timer blinked down the remaining minutes of breath. Professor Zorveth unstrapped with deliberate calm, tentacles steady despite the tremor underfoot. He spoke through the comm, voice measured, turning chaos into protocol. Seal checks, tether pairs, conserve air. Panic answered in clicks and sobbing static. A cracked visor spidered. Frost traced delicate ferns across glass. The shuttle AI recited hard math about a relay node 2 kilometers east, the only path to relaunch. Debate flickered. Abort. Retreat. Sacrifice. Then died under the numbers. Maya scanned tools, resin, spare cells, already moving before permission formed. "We go," she said. Not loud, just certain. Outside. HOX exhaled corrosive wind against the hatch, patient and absolute. They sealed helmets in a staggered rhythm, 17 layers hissing shut, while the hatch indicator blinked green. Maya's lighter human rig looked almost indecent beside the marshmallow bulk of alien armor. The door irised open, and Hawks stabbed inward, cold without mercy. Air thick as liquid, tasting of metal and ruin. Triple gravity folded knees. The first step outside felt like walking into a verdict. Frost formed instantly along visor rims, somewhere in the fog. Something moved, low and patient. Relix faltered. Maya clipped his tether shorter and adjusted her stance. Hips low, steps economical. "Breathe shallow," she said. "Don't fight the weight." Professor Zorveth watched her with a recalibrating gaze. "Class 12, he'd lectured. Hazardous. Absurdly adaptable." Now the label felt less like spectacle and more like leverage against a world that preferred them broken. The first rule on HOX was invisible. Every breath cost more than courage. Filters rasped like sandpaper. Oxygen meters ticking down in thin red increments. In triple gravity. Lungs labored as if lifting iron. Panic burned faster than fuel. Professor Zorveth forced cadence over comms. 2 in, 1 hold, 3 out. turning terror into arithmetic. Students stumbled, learning to shorten steps, to bend knees, to let weight pass through bone instead of fighting it. Corrosive fog licked at seams, etching faint halos along gloves and boots. Maya moved with ruthless economy, chin tucked, shoulders square, tether taut. She demonstrated the low, forward lean that saved oxygen and dignity. Relix mirrored her posture, trembling but upright. "Waste nothing," she murmured. HOX listened without judgment, pressing down until breathing felt like lifting the sky. The ground coughed without warning. A methane pocket ruptured 50 meters away, liquid fire fountaining skyward before igniting in a white-green blossom. The shockwave flattened snow and sound alike. Tethers snapped tight as students were yanked into one another. Heat passed like a slap, brief and treacherous. Then the cold rushed back in to claim it. Professor Zorveth barked for downwind cover while visors flickered with contamination alerts. Maya dragged relics behind a basalt rib, shoulders low, eyes tracking the plume's arc, through thinning fog. Red eyes flared and vanished, predators triangulating noise. The class learned that HOX had no pattern, only appetite. "Cluster," Maya said. "One shape, not many." Filters rasped. Oxygen bled. The planet's teeth had tested them and found hesitation delicious. A sharp hiss cut through the wind. Seal failure. One student's helmet latch jammed, microfractures spidering across the visor as corrosive fog searched for entry. Panic spiked their respiration. Oxygen numbers plummeted. Maya moved before permission, gloved palm clamping the leak, while her other hand snapped open emergency resin. The first spread froze mid-flow. Hawks stealing heat faster than chemistry could bond. "Hold still," she ordered. Voice clipped, steady as a metronome. She pressed her forearm against the seam, sacrificing warmth to force a cure. The resin took, barely. The hiss faded to a thin whisper, then silence. Relics stared at her as if adaptation were witchcraft. Zorveth watched the tremor in her wrist. She tried to hide. Survival wasn't spectacle. It was skin against the world until it yielded. They nearly walked into it. Neon pools bubbled ahead, too bright to be water, vapor rising in thin, stinging veils. Professor Zorveth began a warning about corrosive chemistry, but the geyser erupted before his lecture found breath. A spray arced over them, hissing where it struck basalt. Students scattered, slipping under triple gravity. Tethers snapping taut like nerves. A line of acid kissed Maya's wrist seam. Pain flared sharp and intimate. A hot thread under frozen fabric. She didn't stop. She clamped the seam, kept moving. Eyes forward. "Stay tight," she said. Voice even. "It's not rain. It's a test." Filters rasped. The fog thickened. Behind them, something paced in steam, patient and red-eyed. HOX had teeth in its weather, and the class learned to walk between droplets. The predator stepped fully into view, 6 limbs flexing under frost-crusted hide, tusks curving like scythes. It did not roar. It measured. Red eyes tracked their tethers, mapping weakness in trembling lines. Maya shifted left without pointing, using a basalt ridge to fracture sight lines. "Follow my angle," she murmured. The group compressed, becoming one silhouette against the fog. Triple gravity favored mass. She let it anchor them. Boots grinding into stone. The creature lunged once toward the slowest student, testing the boundary, then halted when the tether snapped tight and bodies braced together. Geometry over panic, distance over pride. Zorveth watched, recalibrating his definition of hazardous. The pack wanted separation. Maya offered shape. HOX adjusted its calculus and began to circle. A student simply stopped, knees buckled under triple gravity, suit thudding into frost as if the planet had pressed a mute button. Oxygen still blinked green, but muscles quit. Breath turned shallow and useless. The relay beacon pulsed faintly ahead, indifferent to bodies. Someone whispered the word, carry, and swallowed it. Maya felt the burn under her seam, felt the predator's attention, felt the arithmetic of distance. Then she crouched, hooked the fallen student's harness, and hauled. Her shoulders screamed, her vision narrowed. Rotate every 2 minutes, she ordered. If you can walk, you can pull. Zorveth stepped in first, tentacles straining, choosing who he would be. They moved as a burdened unit, oxygen bleeding, time thinning. Hawks pressed harder, and learning gained weight. The chasm cut the tundra like a fresh wound, mist boiling from its depths in chemical breaths that howled through narrow stone. The sound wasn't myth. It was pressure-venting rage. On the far side, a relay node blinked a stubborn green, small as hope and just as fragile. Students leaned to look and felt the ground crumble beneath their boots, gravel sliding into nothing. Triple gravity pulled them toward the edge, a quiet invitation. Zorveth dropped modular struts and biofiber coils at their feet. "Construct a crossing," he said. Voice thin. The chasm answered with another scream as a methane surge rolled below. Maya watched the mist pulse in rhythm and understood this was not scenery, but a mouth measuring them. Students built and argued in the same breath. Struts locked, slipped, locked again under triple gravity that punished misalignment like a judge. Biofiber rope hummed under tension. Clamps skidded across brittle basalt. One insisted on rigidity, another on a swing. A third froze mid-calculation as oxygen ticked down. Maya left the half-bridge and studied the mist instead. It rose, paused, fell, regular as a pulse. "Vent cycle," she murmured. Updraft peaks every 30 seconds. Relics crawled beside her, eyes wide. "You're not thinking of jumping." "I'm thinking of timing," she said. Behind them, Zorveth demanded focus, but fear consumed minutes faster than methane. The chasm widened by inches, erasing debate. Engineering required courage. Courage required breath. HOX taxed both without mercy. The first tremor felt like a cough beneath their boots. Pebbles skittered. A clamp popped free and clanged into the abyss. Then the ground heaved with intention. A crack raced along the chasm lip, splitting basalt in a sound like tearing fabric. Students staggered as the gap widened by a body length. Then more, mist roaring from below. The relay node flickered across the void. Suddenly, farther than math allowed. Zorveth's voice faltered. HOX had shown no tectonic activity in ages. Another jolt buckled their half-built span, struts snapping like brittle ribs. Maya dropped to one knee, counting the vent pulse through vibration. "It's changing," she said. "We change faster." The planet shifted again, erasing certainty, and the exam became evacuation. They tried to salvage the bridge as the earth quivered. Anchors bit, biofiber rope stretched, whining under triple gravity. A sudden lurch tightened everything beyond mercy. The line snapped with a wet crack, and tools tumbled into the chasm. Swallowed by screaming mist, A student lunged to catch a falling clamp, boot skidding on loose stone. The tether jerked, the helmet struck rock. A seam split with a thin, treacherous hiss. Oxygen numbers flickered. Maya slammed resin over the tear, breath steady despite the roar in her ears. The compound froze mid-cure. The student's body shuddered once, then went still. Not from drama, but physics. Silence spread faster than fog. The broken line lay coiled at their feet, and HOX claimed its first undeniable payment. Grief cracked open into accusation. Someone said Zorveth had led them into spectacle. Someone else whispered that the human was a curse. Class 12. Walking disaster. Oxygen rasped louder as voices rose. The body lay between them, frost creeping across a visor that no longer fogged. Zorveth did not defend himself. He knelt, tentacles trembling, and closed the student's comm channel. "Hawks does not choose favorites," he said, voice thin. "We do." Maya stared at her burned seam, pain pulsing in rhythm with her heart. She wanted to argue, to bleed the anger out of them, but words cost air. Instead, she stood and faced the chasm. "We move," she said, steady. "Or we join." The spiral tightened, then snapped into motion. They wedged into a basalt crevice barely wide enough for layered suits, backs scraping rock that leached heat like a patient thief. Wind funneled through the crack, turning breath into shards against filters. Corrosive haze threaded the opening, etching faint halos along visors. No one spoke at first. Oxygen was rationed silence. Zorveth folded his appendages close, staring at his hands as if lectures could be rewound. Maya pressed her burned wrist against her chest plate to warm it. Blood beaded and froze at her lip. Relix noticed and said nothing. Fear replaced by a new understanding. The night wasn't darkness, but endurance. Each minute negotiated. Outside. The chasm howled again. Not myth, but pressure. Inside. They counted heartbeats and chose not to break. Morning arrived as a change in vibration rather than light. Maya crawled to the chasm's lip and watched the mist rise, pause, and fall in a stubborn rhythm. She counted under her breath, matching the vent's pulse to the drag in her lungs. Updraft at peak, lift for seconds, then gravity's fist. "We jump on the surge," she said, voice thin but certain. Relix's eyes widened behind frost-filmed glass. "That's madness." "It's timing," Maya replied. Zorveth joined them, gaze measuring the widening gap and the shrinking oxygen. He saw the pattern, too, a machine hidden in chaos. Anchors were set deeper, tethers were checked twice. They would turn HOX's breath into a ladder, or be swallowed by it. They drove anchors into basalt until their arms trembled under triple gravity. Each strike rang thin and brittle, metal biting stone that wanted to flake away. Biofiber coils were threaded and cinched, tension humming like a living wire. Maya's burned seam reopened with every swing. Acid sting crawled beneath numb skin, a private tax she refused to announce. Relix checked knots with shaking precision, eyes flicking to the fog where predators traced wide arcs. A shadow cut the steam, then vanished. "Keep the line low," Maya said. "No slack." Zorveth braced the main tether, appendages straining as he recalculated load and timing. Wind scoured their suits. Corrosion etched at edges. Pain was manageable. Panic was lethal. They anchored not just to rock, but to the decision to move. They tied the tether to Maya's harness and waited for the vent to inhale. Mist thickened, pressure building with a low, metallic moan from the chasm's throat. "On the surge," Zorveth said. Maya took 2 short steps, hips low, and leapt as the updraft bloomed. For a heartbeat she lifted, weight softened by rising gas, hope flickering like a faulty beacon. Then gravity remembered its promise and yanked her down mid-air. She slammed against the far lip, gloves scraping, tether snapping taut behind her. Rock crumbled under her boots. "Pull," she rasped. The line tightened. Bodies leaned back in unison, anchors groaning. Inch by inch she rose, dragged by fear welded into teamwork. She rolled onto solid ground and raised a hand. "Next!" The second jumper moved too soon. Fear outran timing. Boots pounding toward the edge before the vent's breath peaked. The updraft caught weakly, then dropped away, and gravity dragged the body into a steep arc. The tether snapped taut, yanking anchors and shoulders in a violent chorus. Maya dug her heels into basalt, wrapping the line around her forearm despite the burn. "Lean back," she barked. "Hold!" On the far side, Zorveth braced, appendages trembling as students locked together behind him. The jumper slammed against rock, sparks skittering across a scuffed visor. Oxygen flickered. Maya crawled to the lip, hooked the ring, and hauled as the rope screamed under load. They rose, coughing into helmets, alive by inches. Fear learned its pace. The pack struck when the line sagged. 6-limbed shapes burst from steam, red eyes cutting through frost haze. They aimed for the stragglers, the ones still fumbling with knots. Maya dropped from the lip to a lower ledge, boots slamming under triple gravity. She kicked a loose slab into a predator's path. Stone fell like a verdict, slowing the lunge by seconds. "Move!" she snapped into comms. A creature lunged. She sidestepped, letting gravity drag it past. Then drove her shoulder into its flank, using weight as a weapon. The impact jarred her burned seam. Pain flared bright and useful. Behind her, tethers tightened as students jumped in sequence. The pack circled, calculating. Maya held the line until the last tether cleared the edge. The ground betrayed her at the worst second. A slab cracked beneath Maya's boot, tilting toward the chasm as mist roared below. She slipped, fingers clawing for purchase, tether whipping uselessly behind her. Gravity dragged her down. The howl rose in welcome. A tentacle shot out and locked around her wrist. Zorveth anchoring himself against rock, while students snapped into formation behind him. They linked bodies and tethers into a living chain. Fear forged into structure. "Do not let go," Zorveth grunted. Maya felt her shoulder scream, her burned seam tearing again. Hands tightened, anchors bit, boots scraped sparks from basalt. Inch by inch, they hauled her back from the lip. She rolled onto solid ground, breath ragged, eyes bright. "We're even," she whispered. The relay node stood frostbitten and mute, casing etched by corrosive haze. Zorveth pried open the access panel. Metal screamed as it bent, brittle under HOX's cold. Inside. Connectors were rimed white, interface lights dim as dying stars. "Power injection required." The shuttle AI crackled through static. Batteries meant heat. Heat meant survival minutes spent now. Students hesitated, eyes on dwindling reserves. Maya didn't. She yanked her auxiliary cell free and rammed it into the intake, gloved hand shaking. "All in," she said, one by one. Others followed, warmth draining from suits as currents surged. The node's status light brightened, stuttering toward green. Cold crept into joints like a quiet debt collector, warm hands on a cold machine, choosing tomorrow over comfort. The ground convulsed as the relay light steadied, a violent tremor splitting basalt near their boots. "Reboot at 62%, the AI reported. Indifferent to panic, fissures opened, breathing chemical mist. The chasm's howl grew closer. Zorveth ordered retreat, but cold had already seeped into their suits. Heaters dim from sacrificed batteries. They ran in punishing half-steps, triple gravity dragging at thighs and lungs. Behind them, the relay sparked and pushed a clean signal skyward. Guidance stabilized, the AI confirmed. Hope flared, thin, conditional. Another jolt knocked a student sideways. Maya hauled them upright without slowing. "Keep moving," she said. Abort wouldn't save them. Only distance would. Hawks shook again, upgrading every second into a wager against collapse. Relic's steps shortened to nothing. He tried to keep cadence, but triple gravity folded him at the waist. Breath tearing through filters that blinked low. "Go," he rasped, pushing at Maya's shoulder. Another tremor buckled the path. A basalt shard sliced his calf seal, hissing white. Oxygen bled in a thin, treacherous ribbon. Maya's eyes flicked to the shuttle's beacon stuttering through haze, then back to him. She knelt and slammed a patch over the tear, knowing the resin would steal heat they no longer had. "We don't split," she said. Zorveth hesitated for a heartbeat that cost air, then anchored the rear. The class formed up around the slowest body and moved as one. Carrying fear like ballast, survival changed shape. Changed. A flash front rolled across the tundra without warning, temperature plunging beyond numbers into sensation. Frost raced along suit seams and climbed over visors in opaque veins. Metal joints stiffened. Servos whined and stalled. "Thermal failure imminent," the AI warned. Voice thin as ice. Maya flexed her fingers and felt resistance. Skin and polymer negotiating survival. The path to the shuttle blurred behind a curtain of crystalline dust that cut like ground glass. A student stumbled as a knee actuator locked. Zorveth kicked it free with a precise strike, sacrificing insulation to restore motion. Breath became a visible currency, white and vanishing. Hawks had found a new lever, cold that bit through metal and into will. They moved before it claimed both. The shuttle loomed through frost like a memory, hull etched and brittle. "Manual ignition only," the AI crackled. Remote sequences had frozen mid-command. Fuel lines needed priming. Heat would cost the last of their batteries. Zorveth calculated aloud, a ledger of degrees and seconds. If they burned too early, guidance would fail. Too late. The cold would seize the turbines. Maya slammed her auxiliary heater against the intake manifold, skin screaming through the glove as warmth bled into metal. "Now," she said. A student spun the crank. Another fed power into the starter bus. Sparks bit. A cough of flame shuddered through the chamber. The engine tried. Faltered. Tried again. Ignition was math under pressure, and they had no margin left. The engines caught on the third attempt. A raw detonation that rattled teeth and bone. Frost shattered off the hull as thrust built, fighting triple gravity like a fist against a closing door. Outside, the ground split again. A fissure raced toward the landing struts, swallowing basalt in hungry lines. "Release clamps," Zorveth barked. The shuttle lurched, one leg dragging. alarms screaming over rising flame. Maya slammed the manual override and felt the deck tilt beneath her boots. For a breathless second they hovered, trapped between weight and will. Then the breaking world fell away, mist and red eyes shrinking into chaos below. The chasm's howl faded to a thin thread. Hawks kept its dead. The living burned skyward. The engines cut, and silence rushed in harder than any impact. In orbit, HOX spun below them, a scarred sphere wrapped in storm and chemical haze. Frost melted into thin rivulets along the viewport, then froze again in slow patterns. No one spoke. Suits lay piled near the hatch, etched and burned, bearing witness without accusation. Zorveth floated opposite Maya, tentacles folded tight, replaying every choice. Relix removed his helmet with shaking hands and breathed recycled air as if it were new. The shuttle AI listed damage reports in a neutral tone, as though loss could be itemized. Through the glass, a fissure widened and closed like a wound that would not heal. Survival had ended. Consequence had begun. Back at the university, the ceremony felt smaller than the planet they had escaped. Faculty hovered in formal regalia. Eye stalks and fronds angled toward the lone human at the center. Professor Zorveth spoke without theatrics, recounting decisions instead of miracles, timing event, anchoring a line, refusing to abandon the slowest body. He named the dead. He named the cost. Then he conferred an honorary doctorate in extreme survival and, quietly, in defiance of probability. Applause rose in uneven rhythms, more relief than celebration. Maya accepted the insignia with a burned wrist and steady gaze. "Extreme is perspective," she said, brief as oxygen. "Survival is choice." Cameras flashed. The galaxy recalibrated its hazard charts. Humanity's syllabus had expanded. That night, alone in the observation ring, Maya watched HOX diminish into a pale bruise against black. Her wrist throbbed where acid had eaten through polymer and skin. The scar would stay. In the reflection, she saw herself split, hazardous, adaptable, tired. Class 12 was a label others used to explain what they feared. It did not mention the student who never rose. The anchors that snapped. The heat surrendered for a signal. It did not mention the chain of hands that refused to let go. Zorveth joined her without words, and they shared the silence as data scrolled across distant screens. Survival had chosen them back. The price was written in scars and names. Humanity would come. It would carry both. In the end, survival was not about strength alone, but about who they chose to be when the world tried to break them. Hawks demanded oxygen, heat, and lives. It also revealed truth. Courage is collective, and even the most adaptable need a hand to hold the line. Class 12 was never just a warning. It was a responsibility. If this journey moved you, follow the channel and join us for the next descent into the unknown.